Now I'm going to share my screen. All right. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. My name is Nick Gayton. I grew up in the watershed. I just recently finished my master's in public administration from the University of Vermont with a focus in the management of social ecological systems, which is, essentially like the complex system of the watershed itself that we're about to be talking about. I really do care about this watershed. I focused a lot of my projects in my graduate program around it. And I just wanted to present this information to you as the stakeholders because I think it's very relevant to your lives and the impact that this watershed problem and the phosphorus pollution problem can have on your lives. So appreciate you guys being here, and thank you very much. All right, so presentation, pretty much we're just going to talk about a few things, defining scales, what that means, what is the problem, why is it a problem, what system characteristics impact the problem, what has been attempted in the past to address the problem, and what can be done to effectively address it in the future. One second, there we go.
Nick, do you want us to be interactive with this?
If you have questions, feel free to ask. That's how it went last time. But yeah, just feel free to jump right in. It's a small group, so it works just fine. But yeah, so defining scales is really important to effectively analyze any problem because it helps identify the causes of them. The purpose of this is to, identify important leverage points in the cause and effect process of a problem, and then create some targeted policy interventions to try to address it. For my research, I really defined the scale of the entire watershed as the problem, or as the actual focal scale that I studied. And as we dive deeper into the cause of this phosphorus pollution problem in later sections, you'll be able to see how different elements of this watershed system impact each other at different levels. The theoretical framework I used to approach and analyze the watershed is called Social-Ecological Systems theory. In a very broad sense, it's a research framework that asserts that these types of problems are inherently dynamic, complex, and include elements of both social structures and environmental factors that all play important roles within the watershed itself. So the state of the watershed influences the conditions of the pond, and the Maine Department of Environmental Protection lists Sabattus Pond on its top impaired lakes priority list for 2023. And it's actually been on that list for quite some time, as far back as I could see, at least into the early 2010s. Bodies of water are included on this list because of the severity of their impact, but also because it's still believed that their conditions can be improved with some type of intervention. So I just wanted to start from that perspective because I think that's important to establish. The state and even I think that this problem can be improved over time. So, what exactly is the problem? Numerous government reports spanning back 50 plus years agree it's a combination of external phosphorus pollution from the watershed and internal phosphorus loading from the pond due to its hydrology and physical characteristics. As you all have probably observed, a very visible symptom of this twofold problem is the mid to late summer cyanobacteria algae blooms spanning back to the mid 20th century. The internal dynamics of the pond and external conditions of the watershed both play very significant and challenging roles within the system. This figure reflects the phosphorus levels within the pond, with an average total phosphorus level taken from an TP-EC core of 41 micrograms per liter. Phosphorus levels over 12 micrograms per liter in any typical lake or pond usually do produce blooms. Sabattus has been well above that since measurements started in 1977. And although there is some missing data from some earlier years, every data point is over that 12 micrograms per liter mark. So besides the pond, getting smelly and green in the summertime, why is this a problem? I think it's a problem because of its secondary impacts on the environment, human well-being, and human infrastructure. So let's start by looking at the impacts of the problem on the environment, and the algae blooms are a very big factor in that. So these blooms are dangerous to the health of people, pets, wildlife, and the environment due to the toxins that they produce if ingested. Furthermore, once dead, the billions of algae sink to the bottom of the pond. The dead algae are then decomposed by bacteria whose consumption process involves removing oxygen from the water. This deoxygenation process produces anoxic or hypoxic dead zones where neither fish nor plants can live, further impacting the biodiversity and health of the pond. Biodiversity loss within the pond has already been documented throughout the years. For example, the pond once held a very healthy population of smelt. However, their habitat was significantly destroyed by the excessive amount of algae and propagation of underwater plant life that grew due to the increased phosphorus levels within the water. Conditions for blooms are also very positively affected by longer periods of warmer weather caused by climate change. For Maine, current projections suggest a much warmer and wetter climate if existing climate change mitigation trends and adaptation policies remain consistent. This then can create a very positive feedback loop for the ecological system, increasing the frequency and intensity of the blooms, which can then increase its transition into a much more negative, deoxygenated state. And that perspective of negative is from the viewpoint of human well-being of those who live around the watershed and within it, and for the biodiversity and environmental factors as well. This problem has also impacted many different aspects of human well-being in the community. Harmful algae blooms have been associated with loss in property value, which impacts both municipal governments and property owners alike. They are also associated with drops in recreational activities like swimming, fishing, boating, etc. People are much less likely to use the ponds during these blooms, potentially affecting any tax revenue gained or money spent at local businesses to fill up boats with gas, buy bait, or pick up some lunch at a local corner store. Historically, Sabattus Pond once had a very thriving beach tourism industry from the 1930s to the 1970s. Located at the southern tip of the pond, Martins Point in Sabattus Long Beach, business activities contributed to the community's overall economic health. Although there are many contributing factors to the decline in these areas, the economic health of the community during that time, like mill closings and et cetera, the decline of these businesses and the scale of recreational use at that time does coincide with the creation of an egg farm in the 1970s and increasingly high levels of phosphorus during that same time period. That egg farm in question has been very anecdotally associated with massive increases in phosphorus levels within the pond and the watershed. Sabattus Pond is also currently has a very healthy recreational fishing industry. Ice fishing is important. Pike is a very big sport fish. How much does that contribute to our local economies is I think a question that we should really be asking. These are all unknowns that we should really be thinking about. Ice fishing is a very big pull in the pond in the winter. Brings hundreds of snowmobilers. There's a derby associated with it that's been going on for years. These algae blooms have the potential to decimate fish populations. And not to mention too, there are also health implications for community members who use the pond for recreational services and pets and other wildlife, depending on the specific genetic characteristics of the algae themselves, which at this time we don't really know. Infrastructure impacts have been most recently felt by the Sabattus Water and Sanitation District. Although this is very limited to the community of Sabattus, the emergence of this impact speaks to the unpredictability that complex problems like these can have. So in 2021, the Sabattus Water and Sanitation District received a report from the Maine Department of Environmental Protections concerning the phosphorus levels of its wastewater runoff system. So Sabattus Water and Sanitation District uses Sabattus Pond, water from Sabattus Pond that comes from Sabattus River in its wastewater treatment process. And since that water already contains very high levels of phosphorus, it had a very compounding effect on the wastewater produced. So this fix is extremely expensive. Most recent quotes range from $12 to $16 million. And although the water district is pursuing grant funding for this fix, it still represents a very substantial financial burden for the 600 or so members that use this system within the watershed.
Is that an actual building that does the sanitation? Is that?
Yes, yeah. So if you look at this image right down here, you'll see a little circle right here.
Yeah.
And it says Sabattus Water and Sanitation District. So what's hard to see right now is that if you look at Sleeper Dam up here, Sabattus River kind of goes over first crossroad and then kind of snakes around. You can kind of see it a little bit to the south of Sleeper Dam, and it winds its way and it finds its way right around the Sabattus Water and Sanitation District.
So does that mean water is being released into the river down by Sleeper Dam?
Yes.
So yes,
I was
yeah.
wondering if you'd weigh in on that, Dan. Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah, it just they filter the water, purify it, if you will, and then release it into the river.
And the river goes to Bath?
No, goes to the Androscoggin in Lisbon,
Oh, okay.
and then it goes to Merrymeeting Bay. It joins the Kennebec. And yeah, so it does go through Bath.
Okay, but it goes to Lisbon Falls first.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And the Sabattus River, from my understanding of the amount of phosphorus that's able to be put into rivers and streams and things like that, it's based on the speed of their flow. Sabattus River actually has a pretty slow flow, which limits the amount of phosphorus that anybody is allowed to put into the pond itself, or sorry, the river itself. And that coupled with a regulation change from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection's, within the last few years, is what kind of had the Sabattus Water and Sanitation District not meet those new levels. So they were already operating under the same levels that they would put into the water. Those levels did change, but that still indicates that the water coming from Sabattus Pond is still a problem that's prompting them to have to do this fix. Yeah.
Though, from what I'm told, the water that comes out of the treatment plant will pass any inspection.
Mm-hmm.
What they used to do is they take water and they would put trout fry in, and that was a test of if the fry lived. It was good. If they died, we had problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's like
The fry would live in the water that was coming from the treatment plant,
Mm-hmm.
but it would not live. The fry would not live in the water coming from the lake.
So it's like a Salem witch trial.
I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So what system characteristics really impacted this problem? And by characteristic, I mean like almost an element of the watershed itself. So what I've included here is a kind of complex, but it's called a threshold matrix. And I developed this during one of my projects, which was a resilience assessment. And essentially, a threshold matrix shows the causes and impact chain of those elements within the watershed itself. So the three columns up at the top are the scale. So you have Sabattus Pond, which you can kind of consider the micro scale. The focal system scale would be the watershed itself. So as we're moving to the right, it moves up in larger scales. So we have the pond, then the watershed, and then the regional scale, which would encompass much more than just the watershed itself, kind of like the geographical area and surrounding ecosystem of the watershed itself. And all of these things impact each other. So arrows indicate a research proven impact on the arrow's endpoint. The blue boxes represent a current measurement of regime. So essentially, I'll show an example here. So if you look up in the top left-hand corner, you see it says regime eutrophic. So that essentially is talking about the water clarity of the pond. So a eutrophic pond or a eutrophic body of water is essentially, you can think of it like dirty water. It's not clear. It's not very clear. And then so an alternate regime, and you can see it down at the bottom, it says clear water. So in order for the dirty water, which is the current state of the Sabattus Pond, to get to a clear water, we can use the measurement of P levels, which stands for phosphorus levels, to determine where that element of this system is in this transition cycle. So we can see how far away it is from transitioning back to a clear water state, and it kind of gives us an idea of how much work or how much time needs to be put in to try to revert this pond back. And it would be a lot easier if there was just one factor, but as you can see here, I have I have over 10. So it gets very complex when they all feed off of each other and interact with each other. So the clarity and the eutrophic regime is impacted by, erosion rates. So the erosion rates of the surrounding watershed all play into, how clean and clear the water is. So more phosphorus-rich soil that gets pumped into the pond, affected by precipitation rates and human development, then further affects how the water clarity and the phosphorus levels actually within it. And then you can see that this is a chain that cycles back around eventually, and it all impacts each other in certain ways. And essentially, this is just to explain how complex this problem actually is. And a lot of things really need to happen at once. All of these focal system characteristics impact each other, and the twofold problem of the internal dynamics of the pond and the external conditions of the watershed discussed previously in many different ways. And a lot of the things to address the problem in the past, I don't think have really tried to address all of those things at once. And that is just my perspective, but it is based off of my research into this. So, yep.
What's human development, for example?
Human development is anything like building up around the pond itself. So you can look at GPS data here. Let me switch to this slide real quick just to show you. So you can see this is a satellite image of Sabattus Pond Watershed. It is a little bit bigger. I zoomed in a little bit just so you can see. But you can see that there are farms there. There are roads, there are new developments. There's the quarry down here. All of those things are considered human development. So if somebody even knocks down a tree on the side of a pond, that is considered human development. Anything that is impacted by humans on the ecosystem or the environment itself. And you can look at historic data from the watershed, like in Google Images and in satellite images going back to, I think it was like 1985, but of course the clarity gets very bad back then. But you can really see the encroachment of human development on these areas. And it's very interesting to see the time lapse of that. And that all impacts erosion rates. That also impacts the amount of like natural flows of, it also impacts the natural flows of water that enter the watershed and the pond. It all plays into a lot of different things. And human development too is also agricultural and farming as well. And although that has historically declined over the past 50 years, there is still no real accounting of how much chemical fertilizer is still used and how much that still affects the erosion rates within the watershed itself. Let's see. So in the last 50 years, there have been a number of different solutions to try to address the problem. We've looked at the causes, we looked at the impacts. Older projects were typically very top-down approaches from state-level institutions that kind of really didn't provide much additional support after the projects were completed. I also observed too that there was really no essential governing body or a group of people in place to kind of take over and collect and pass on this institutional knowledge gained from these past projects once they were complete. They kind of just all fizzle out in a way. The closest thing to a governing body that I observed is the Sabattus Dam Commission. And from my understanding, however, their primary directive is really just to only control the opening and closing of the dam on Sabattus Pond every year, and the accompanying duties that go along with that. But however, as this process has continued, I've spoken with many different people about this topic, and they've all pointed me in some really great, excellent new directions of past efforts or existing data that I'm still attempting to get access to. For example, Bates College, in conjunction with the University of New Hampshire, have a National Science Foundation grant, spearheaded by a professor at Bates, who I've contacted, I've spoken with once and emailed once, but I'm still waiting to hear back from her. Apparently, they have data on this buoy that's out there in Sabattus Pond now that is measuring a lot of the things that I say need to be measured to kind of move forward, which is a great plus. I'm still working on getting access to that data just to see where they're at, and that, from my understanding, is still only a couple years into that project. But things are still going on, which is a positive.
Did you ever talk to Frankie from UNH? He had a drone that he was watching the algae from the above.
So I never talked to Frankie specifically, but I did talk to a graduate student at Bates, who has since moved on to a professorship at somewhere in New York. But they have linked me up with another person who's working on this, who is doing the drone stuff from Bates themselves. So I think, so yes, in a way, yes, I'm in contact, but I have not heard back from Frankie yet.
Yeah, since he did the drone from Mars Point, we are interested in what was learned from that.
From my understanding, because I've read I've read the online material that they have, and although it is not, I mean, it doesn't contain their data, it does contain like a good like summary of their goals and mission. From my understanding, they're attempting to measure the size and area of the algae blooms themselves when they happen, which is an important characteristic to try to measure and to have when you try to make decisions how to impact the problem itself.
That's pretty much lake wide.
Exactly, yeah. From my understanding, they're trying to see like over time where it starts, and although these algae blooms can really spawn up very quickly, they're trying to see where they originate from, because usually that's a good indicator of where the most phosphorus is within the pond itself at that time. But of course, there's a lot of internal characteristics with the pond too that play into this. It's a very shallow pond, and the wind stirs it up very much. So just because an algae bloom happens on the eastern side of the lake 1 month, and it happens on the western side of the lake the next month, doesn't really help with that determination in the way.
Yeah, and it also concentrates itself in the coves.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, the wind definitely is a huge factor here.
Yeah.
And throughout this presentation, I've kind of really tried to emphasize the depth and the true complexity of the issue, with that threshold matrix and how these things interact with each other. Current practices and previously attempted solutions, I don't think are really addressing the depth of that complexity. Many of these efforts are very siloed. As I was speaking with people, throughout the last year and a half, interviewing people and up until, as recently as last week, I'm still finding out new things. And when I talked to people who are currently working on projects that are around the pond, or, I asked them if they are familiar with this project or that project, or, et cetera, and they don't know about it. And I think that is part of the problem as well. It's very siloed. People, this needs to be connected, and it needs to be connected, I think, by the stakeholders themselves. And I think that, historically, looking at the previous attempts to address the problem, I think the impacted stakeholders have largely been left out of the equation to the extent that they truly need to be. And, this kind of leads me into my final section. What can be done now to effectively address the problem? So one of the main difficulties, with managing problems like these, like we've said, they're very inherently complex. There are a multitude of different social, economic, environmental constraints and factors that all play into each other in some way, shape, or form. This is what really makes it a complex system, and what makes it very difficult to craft policy or attempt solutions to actually address it. It also is what makes it difficult to predict what other issues could arise from this problem, which at this time are simply unknown to us, without properly mapping out the complexity of the interactions within the system and having the actual localized data to support it. And essentially, to properly begin, I think we really need that localized data. To do this, I suggest the formation of a very polycentric, inclusive committee with a diverse perspectives, led and controlled by you, the impacted stakeholders within this focal system and within this community of this watershed communities.
Well,
yep.
Donna, there used to be a lake association name of it was Sabattus Pond Watershed Partnership. And Donna, I think you have all the information on that, or what's left of it.
Well, we disbanded. I think we took what little money was left and donated it to one of the bigger lake associations. We didn't eventually there just wasn't enough people. There was Robin, me, and Jean O'Keefe, and nobody else was involved. So we just disbanded.
Okay.
And then I just put together a Facebook page to try and corral some people. And we tried to communicate with other road associations to get an umbrella of working groups together, but not until Nick have we come up with a possible framework that might bring us all in, the dam commission and the road associations. And
Well, yeah, the road associations, you have one on Mars Point Road.
Mm-hmm.
And to my knowledge, unless there's one off of in Green, off of Barnard's Cove Road.
Lake Shore, maybe?
Well, there's Lake Shore and there's First Avenue, Second Avenue, and
Yeah.
Lake Shore. I don't know if there's a real association there, but I know there was some talk about it. But that is about the extent of the road associations. Now, Wales does not have a town road leading to the lake.
Yeah.
All of theirs are private roads. And Mars Point Road, where Donna lives, is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
In Sabattus, geez, nearly all of them are town roads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not all. No, there are some that are private.
I find when you get a little bit closer to the lake, it's usually the roads that lead to those roads that are on the lake that are public. And Martin's Point is publicly owned by the town now. Yeah, and that's the boat launch. Yeah,
but that is
Martin's Point.
Yeah, Martin's Point. Now, that is a town road, but so is Lakeshore Drive that comes, or Lake Street. I think it's Lake Street.
Mm-hmm.
That comes off of that road and goes all the way up into Green.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a town road.
Yeah, yeah. You're talking about the one that goes parallel to the lake when you're standing on the dock looking back on the shore, correct?
And at the boat launch?
Yeah.
Okay, when you come down to the boat launch,
yep.
You take a right to go into Martin's Point, take a left, and that takes you up that road. That road is paved.
Shore Drive.
Is it Shore Drive?
Yeah, that's where my house is.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I think somebody's trying to.
No, I was just saying it's Shore Drive. That's where we are. That's the road to the left.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. That's the name of it?
Yeah.
Shore Drive. Yeah.
It is, we used to call it, I've been here for a long time, so roads have changed through the years.
Absolutely, yeah. And just the fact that some are town owned and some are private, really does also speak again to the complexity of the problem. You're going to have to start to involve. At some point we're going to have to start to involve the municipalities, and I've presented to right now the Board of Selectmen in Sabattus and the Board of Selectmen in Wales. I've reached out to a couple of the state reps too and heard back from two of them. I've reached out to Green as well, but I haven't heard anything back from their town manager. So I do plan to follow up with them again, and I'd like to present to them again. I've also done a lot of research too on Facebook and state websites looking for these road associations. Facebook groups are also important too, and I do have a list of those as well. And after this presentation is done, I'll show you all a networking networking list that I'm working on that I think you guys might find interesting and that might be useful, as moving forward. But back to this
Okay.
committee, I think that this mission should really be centered around the coordination with all of these other ongoing efforts, and really try to address the depth and complexity of that problem. As stakeholders in the community, your voice really does matter, and I think it matters a lot. Any type of solution that these people or these projects would try to implement on you, would impact you. And the success of those implementations really does come back to your involvement. After forming, I think the first goal of this committee should really be to conduct their own resilience assessment of the watershed. And although I've already conducted one, mine is only just one perspective. I stand by all of my research, but I'm just still limited by my own individual experiences, knowledge, and expertise. These types of complex problems really do require more diverse thought, perspective, and participation to really truly create effective solutions that both fit the needs of existing stakeholders and the environments they exist within. And we are at my last slide now. This slide contains a list of some of the recommendation interventions that I suggested after my resilience assessment. And, potential reference points, it could be a potential reference point to the starting of the committee based on the overall literature of other case studies. I see my completed resilience assessment as a potential guide for this committee once created, but it's important for the process for them to conduct, lead, and make decisions. Just in this one Zoom meeting alone, we've had people chime in with different perspectives and things that I wasn't, aware of, which is the exact reason why things like these really do require different perspectives. In my resilience assessment, my recommendation is focused very heavily on establishing those measurements listed right there. To really indicate where this watershed is in its transition cycle. I did this because those measurements would further inform the financial management and governance and education interventions that we would eventually try to implement. That localized data is very key. We can look at other case studies and research, but they really can't prescribe the specific intervention design for this specific system itself. So in conclusion to all of you, you may be wondering what U.S. stakeholders can do in the face of this issue, but ultimately I think that's up for you to collectively decide what you want to do, to try to address this problem. I think it might be hard to envision now, but for full transparency, this is not a problem that will be fixed in a few years. Realistically, it will probably take decades. But a negative transition of the ponds to a hypoxic or anoxic state will have very unpredictable rippling effects on the environment, biodiversity, the local economy, the human well-being of community members, and the health of the surrounding ecosystem. Once these specific tipping points are reached within similar systems such as this watershed, transitions to that negative deoxygenated state can happen very rapidly. And at that point, it is already too late to effectively act. This place is really my home. I care about it a lot. I know I've said that, but I don't necessarily live there anymore, but I'm definitely offering to help this process along. My goal is just to have this research be valuable to you, and then to try to help you realize your own power and agency in the position of it. These things should be your decisions to make. My idea for this committee and this research suggest areas to start or where to start. It's just a mechanism for you to assert that own agency of choice. I think in order to prevent, really our, children and grandchildren's generations from really trying to address this problem, we really owe it to them to try to do something about it or start doing something about it now. I appreciate all of your time. I know this presentation was long, so thank you very much. Thank you for all of your interest. Are there any questions?
One other thing, Nick, that we do have a road association over on Sanborn Road.
Okay.
It's kind of a loose association. It's not very active. It's more just for plowing and grading, but I can forward the contact information for the guy that more or less spearheads it. I don't know if he can share the list with you or not, but there's got to be 30 or 40 properties over there that, some people are full-time, some people are summer.
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
at least that's a start. it's a start to try to get some contacts.
No, and that's what it's all about. I'm gonna pop up Tristan, go ahead. Sorry, you had your hand raised.
No, I just wanted to say two things. I see that you're recording it, Nick. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get into the room earlier. I was stuck in the waiting room there for a bit.
Oh, no worries.
I wanted to say hello to everybody. So my name's Tristan Tabor. I'm the Water Quality Program Director for Lake Stewards of Maine. We are a resource, and we will be working closely with, you know, the community as a whole as we continue to collect water quality data. We have a couple of volunteers in that area that are collecting data, and Christine Garrett also lives in that area. So.
Christine is my daughter.
Yeah, Dan. Is
Oh,
on
okay.
right now.
Yeah. Hi, Dan.
Yeah. Hi, Tristan. Yeah, and I'm the water quality
Historian?
volunteer.
You're the historian.
I'm the historian. I'm also the volunteer. I've only been doing it for taking water samples for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent work, honestly.
how come you don't have Christine on here?
She couldn't make it tonight. I actually she was like, oh, was that tonight? Shoot, I want to go to that, but maybe there will be a recording. So Nick, that's a good thing. Recording it. She definitely wanted to see that. So
yeah, no, I plan to release a Google Drive link to the recording once I upload it after this. So if anybody on that email list that we have currently wants to view it, they can certainly do that on their own time. Or not on their own time, but, you know, whenever is convenient for them, of course.
thanks so much.
No, thanks for joining us, Tristan. I appreciate it. All right.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but it all seems so amorphous to me. I don't know where to focus.
And that is certainly like a difficult thing. And I'm going to share my screen again real quick, because as I've been doing this community outreach stuff, I've been building a network map is kind of what they call it in my field. And I'm going to show it to you guys right now. And keep in mind, this is just my one perspective, but it helps me get these connections down as much as I can. So let me just share this. So I'm using this website that's been excellent. I've used it in my graduate program too. It's called Mural, and you can kind of create a network map. So I've been doing that with everybody that I've been in contact with, everybody that I've spoken with personally, and I've been trying to map out all of their interconnections to try to help out with that with that engagement and outreach portion. You know, there's Donna. Donna was one of the first connections that I reached out to in this after the completion of my resilience assessment. And this will get larger as it goes on. You know, and as I speak to newer or more organizations, I add more in. Blue represents governmental in some way, shape, or form. You know, you see we have the Maine Department of Environmental Protections, and I also have their scales and their formality. You know, it's a formal institution. It's a regional governance institution. You know, for the town of Wales, you know, that is a formal institution. It's local governance, and the same with just move that, but it's a very useful tool. And I think as the committee goes on, I think utilizing this will really help with the outreach and engagement aspect of it. As you can see, it's kind of getting a little interconnected now, and it's just begun. But it's a great tool, and I can give you all access to this as well. I have spots for like individual affiliations for people and those connections that go outward. A lot of people I've talked about, you know, are work in real estate or work in law, and or have those connections like Ken was speaking about. But to answer your question, Donna, where to start first? I really think starting first is just the formation of some type of stakeholder committee. I think that is definitely where it needs to start. I think where we move after that, you know, I am an extended member of this community. Like I said, I grew up here. I think, and I'm offering my guidance and my expertise on this. But I think starting it is definitely where to begin. And then conducting your own resilience assessment of this watershed is, I think, where it needs to begin. And that resilience assessment will bring in, similar to what mine had done, but from the perspective of many different people, not just myself. And I will give you all access to my own resilience assessment, so you can see what I'm speaking about. It's essentially you're kind of just taking an accounting of almost everything within the actual watershed system into an account. So it literally just tries to see how sustainable and resilient that this watershed is to a specific community value. So what I chose for the community value within my resilience assessment was the recreational use of Sabattus Pond. That was I found recreational use of each community's natural capital in each of their comprehensive plans that were available. So Wales's comprehensive plan, Sabattus's comprehensive plan, and I think Leeds's comprehensive plan all spoke about having recreational access to their natural capital. So a transition of this pond into a hypoxic state would certainly impact that. So that community value was used to kind of test the resilience, the current state of the pond and its resilience against what a transition to a more positive or negative state would look like, and how that would impact the community at large, and how effective the actual watershed and community would be at responding to external shocks.
I think what he's saying, Donna, is
Sorry.
But go on.
We'd have to start up the
Sabattus Pond Watershed
again.
Well, or some version of it. I mean, because
Some version of it.
that goes back. It's frustrating because Nick, it's not like we don't care.
No, absolutely not. Yeah,
it's just we don't know how to maybe bring all the cats together and put them in the same direction. I don't know. We don't know what to do. I don't know if I can speak for Dan. He's worked a lot harder than I have on finding solutions.
Well, I was the co-founder of the Sabattus Pond Watershed Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very involved in forming the Dam Commission. But that was 23, 24 years ago.
Yeah.
I was a lot younger.
Yeah, but now you've got a daughter that's involved.
She's been involved for the past her whole life.
Right.
Because she's 38 years old, I think.
Yeah.
And she's been involved. She's been from when she was a kid. We've lived here.
Yeah, she was at the dinner table when you talked about these things.
Yeah. And she was there while we were forming these associations,
task groups. Yeah. Okay, so what you're saying, Nick, is what we should focus on now is putting together a framework of stakeholders.
Yeah.
And then to figure out how to do a resilience assessment.
Yes, which I can walk you all through.
Okay.
And essentially, and I apologize, I've found, like, throughout my research, if I've presented the idea that I think people don't care about this, that is the exact opposite of what my research has found. You have people like Dan who have spent his entire life almost taking water quality samples of this. You have people in Tristan, like his organization, that have been assisting and training people throughout the state. If anything, my research has proven the exact opposite, that people do in fact very much care. And if honestly, the interest that I've received just in reaching out in the past month to people has also proven that too. I think where the thing is lacking is that direction. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but my actual expertise is in organizing and funneling this type of your agency and power into a way that can try to produce something effective and positive change. And honestly, the building the coalition of very diverse stakeholder groups and stakeholders themselves is eventually going to need to be targeted to your elected officials, your municipalities, because let's face it, it's going to take money eventually to do these things. And it's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take grant funding. It's going to take support from higher scales, and that requires pressure from a very diverse group of people and a very diverse group of organizations. And that is where I think we focus. Sorry, Dan, go.
I was going to interject here that the DEP has these 319 grants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The Watershed Partnership had received 2 or 3 of them. I forget exactly. What's that, Nick?
I think it was 3. Yeah, it was 3 over the course. Yeah.
But that was a lot of work, and that was again for younger.
Go on, Dan.
I'm sorry.
I mean, a large step in this. Okay, so I understand that, like, and I have within the resilience assessment that I created is like a 50 pages single spaced of like steps on how to do this. And it involves educational interventions to recruit young people to get involved in this, because that is definitely a lacking portion of that. You know, like you know, people who have been around a while, your cultural and your cultural capital, the knowledge that you have of this is extremely valuable. But at some point, it's going to take some type of people going out there and doing some very physical labor work to do some of these things. And
watershed surveys, and there was a piece that we did over there on First Avenue that we put in erosion control, planting,
culverts,
a bunch of stuff.
And
but that was a long time ago.
Yeah. And you know, from my perspective, I see the work ahead is very daunting. It's going to be a long time, and like I said, it's going to take decades to really see some effective results. But the alternative here is that this project or this pond continues on its decline, and we again currently don't know what state in the process it is in its decline. But eventually, and I can show you the case studies, the scientific literature. You know, a fully hypoxic or anoxic pond can decimate an entire population of fish. You know, you could just wake up one day and see thousands of floating fish in your pond. And like I said,
and we have had occasional fish kills. And
that's because of the deoxygenation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is not a good sign. You know, from the case studies that I've read, that is not a good sign of how close it is to the tipping point of fully going towards a hypoxic or anapoxic state. So at this time, you know, from what I've gathered, of course, I don't have the scientific research to back it up specifically for this pond, but anecdotally, I have spoken to people like Dan who have said that, you know, there have been fish kills off in the past, specific to specific parts of the pond. But, you know, that can happen to the entire pond. And you know, there's no telling when. It could be 10 years, it could be 50, it could be 100 years from now. But that will happen. It will happen unless something is done. And that's case study after case study.
And the fish kills were white perch, which is a school fish. So it's probably a school. But in my DO samples,
dissolved oxygen.
Yes. At the bottom, we'd get to a 2, which is relatively low. Well, it is low.
Yeah.
But at the surface at 2 meters, and it was at the bottom that the DO really dropped off. Now, one thing Scott had told me, he'd like to see a DO at midnight.
Yeah, no, honestly,
I just couldn't get myself out there at midnight.
And Dan, all the work that you've done is incredibly important, but I mean, it also shouldn't only be up to you to try to get it done. You know what I'm saying? And like that's kind of like the the collection of stakeholders in that I would like to try to get for everybody, and like that coordination and that organization. So that network chart that I shared, is just beginning. But I mean, I've seen them that span like, hundreds of actual organizations and all of their interconnections and things like that. And I think that's incredibly valuable when you do try to orchestrate or organize some type of I don't want to say political pressure in a way, but when you try to assert your agency to try to get something to change, because as much as this saying might not be the best saying, the squeaky wheel does get the grease.
Yeah.
There are many different ponds that are facing similar problems like this in the state, maybe about a collection of 25 that are worse, but Sabattus is definitely like within the top 15 for sure. And I've seen email communications from state officials that say it's number one or number two.
Yeah.
So I think applying that political pressure now is a very interesting policy window to try to do. With the research that I have, I think it's a good time to try to start. And like I said, the sooner we all start and try to do this, I think it'll be better in the long run, because at the rate it's going now, and not to dissuade anybody or say anything about all of the previous efforts, but I think like in 50 years the Board of Selectmen and Sabattus would be looking at themselves like what happened, like or you know what I mean, and if nothing was done, like I said, at that point it's too late to try to effectively do anything. You're talking hundreds of years.
It's the Board of Selectmen in all three towns.
Absolutely.
And Wales.
Yes. Yeah. And even Leeds and Monmouth too, because they're partially part of the watershed.
They're partially part of the watershed, but they don't have lake frontage.
True.
Which means that hard to deal with, especially Monmouth. They don't own they're in the watershed, but they don't care about Sabattus.
I've made a list of stakeholders, and I definitely, I've spoken to the town manager of Monmouth back in last fall when I was originally doing a lot of this, and he seemed open to doing something because historically, if they do have farming on any of those streams that come into the watershed itself, that would be phosphorus that's impacting the lake, the pond, eventually down the road. And when I did speak to him, I found more hesitation, I guess you could say, in the Leeds town manager than in the Monmouth one. But I mean, that's the type of thing where a building of political pressure can be applied.
Right.
If many different community members from all three of these communities are saying, "Hey, all we want you to do is try to limit the amount of phosphorus used in farming on, in these areas," I don't think it's. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, but I don't think it's a hard ask to say, this is impacting us down the line. Can we do something about it? And honestly, it comes back to, cooperation, compromise and things like that, and building these coalitions based on like mutual respect and,
Are you familiar with the Little Alaska Farm?
No.
In Leeds?
No, not specifically.
The river runs right through the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Little Alaska Farm has been bought by the Amish community.
Oh, okay, that's a different dynamic. Yeah.
So
it's true.
Yeah, so they are farming.
So they would be another important group to have in our organization.
Absolutely, yeah. I would have to look into how we would have to incorporate them. I'm not sure about the digital aspect. I apologize for my ignorance there. But
if they're Amish, they're probably ecologically concerned.
That was my thought too, because they probably wouldn't be using the actual chemical fertilizers that were produced that are produced now. And like I said, I apologize. I'm not very familiar with the Amish community, so I don't know if that's a thing. But
I don't know what their farming is.
Mm-hmm.
But the Amish are farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we can get them involved, I'm sure. There's the food stand, they have a vegetable stand. So there are people that we can find that will be a part of us, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Work
And,
on
this is, this meeting is just the second presentation opportunity of the research, and, I plan, on sending out uh, a meeting for next week to kind of like really, have the first established committee meeting. So all of those of you that are attending right now, if you wouldn't mind emailing me your availability for next week, and I can try to match it up with everybody else's who's emailed me as well, who's interested in participating. And that way we can kind of have our initial like first discussion of like building this committee type thing.
I can tell you Wednesday
Sounds
would be good for me.
Wednesday would be good for you? Okay.
I'm open. But
Okay.
I'll email you, but I'm open.
Perfect. Are there any other questions?
No, but I will tell you, I'm trying to get my daughter to take over my sampling,
Mm-hmm.
and she can use my boat and everything. She can come here, and and she can bring her kids with her and teach them, so that we can keep on going.
So we can use this group to pressure your daughter to get more involved with Dad.
Well, I can, yeah, but Tristan's listening. He hears this.
Part of my plan for the education and outreach portion of it is actually involving schools, and outreaching to schools to try to get them involved in the simpler measurement process. So maybe Dan, we might be able to find a high schooler who might be willing to do some of that stuff too.
Well, we had an Oak Hill science teacher that was working on projects 1 year or 2
Yeah.
years.
Mr.
Yes,
Zewis, I believe.
that
Yeah.
was Dr. Oh, geez, Dr. She was a professor or an associate professor at Bates, and she transferred over to Oak Hill, and she was a science teacher.
Was it
Because
Dr. Ongley?
Ongley, yes,
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah,
Ongley.
she was the chemistry teacher when I was in high school.
Oh,
Okay, well, we got to clone her.
Yeah.
Well, from what I hear, she's passed.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I did not know that. Tristan, question. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go. I was just going to say that one of our sort of elements that we've been considering as part of the strategic plan.
Oh,
Where'd he go?
I think he might have disconnected.
The schooling, Nick, I don't know. I don't know how old you are, but years ago,
yeah,
I was. I had to go and do a thing with the grade school kids.
Oh, okay.
We had something going on with Lansley. No.
Yeah, he was a superintendent, I think, right? Back in the day.
No, he was a teacher.
Lansley. I graduated high school in 2009 at Oak Hill. So I'm 32 this year in July. So
well, let's see. A friend of mine just a month ago sent me a picture, and I was in it, and her daughter was in it.
oh, funny.
Yeah, and she was going through and she found it. But it was of that, or it was one of those things. We were at Martin's Point, and all of the kids had a science, different places to go to see different things, and I was one of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, that aspect of things in my field is called community science programs, and they are very effective for one, engagement, and two, communication of science issues. So it's like a very twofold, it's a very effective two-way communication method because it involves their active participation. So a couple of the ideas that I've just had are, you can even have grade school kids because part of this element of getting these measurements is taking temperature, or not water temperature, just air temperature specifically, or precipitation rates. You could have even kids as fourth grade, fifth grade, go outside with their teacher and just take it once a week and then send that data to us in a way. It's very those types of data are very accessible, but it also gets them involved. It gets them knowledgeable about this the topic early on, and I think that is an important element of it as well. But,
Yeah.
sorry, I was waiting for Tristan to see if he would come in, but he may have lost internet connection wherever he is. But thank you all. Any other questions or anything like that? Are we good? Feel free to email me too if you have some after the fact. I'm going to email you all on Monday with a proposed meeting date and for the first committee thing, and then a draft agenda too. So if you want to add anything to the draft agenda that you think I might have missed, just email me back and I'll just throw it right on there. No problem at all. So
I got to add this. The Dam Commission is right now working on replacing the dam.
Yeah.
Which is going to be expensive to the three towns.
Hmm.
So it's like, how much are the towns going to absorb?
Yeah, my inclination on that is that they probably want to avoid as much financial liability as possible.
Well,
I
on
mean,
replacing the dam, it's got to be done.
no, absolutely, yeah. Did you know that Sabattus or Sleeper Dam is one of the only municipal controlled dams in the state? They're all usually state run dams and state controlled dams. Yeah.
That's because it's a big history lesson. The town got sick of answering to the DEP.
Yeah.
Which is why they formed the Dam Commission. It's an interlocal agreement. There's two of them that I know of in the state
Mhm.
that do it this way. So that's why the towns control the dam.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
you're
it
right.
goes back to that relationship between power and authority and things like that as well, which is a factor in all of this
Right.
also. Yeah, but
Yeah. Look,
Okay.
the state can get heavy-handed, and the state did get heavy-handed with our dam. And
yeah,
and the towns came in and said, no, we're not putting up with this, which is why they now control the dam.
Mhm.
I'm trying to say this because I went through it. I'm trying to say it as nice as possible.
I've read a lot of those old reports, Dan. I know what you're talking about.
Right, I have to.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Alrighty.
you.
Yep.
I don't know I don't know. It's just what's in this for you is just because you have family connections and you care.
He's from Sabattus.
Yeah, that's your.
He lived right next to the dam, just about.
Yeah,
Well,
Conway
your
Street.
father does right now.
He does. Yeah. That's an interesting question. I just know that the impact and the problems that my generation is going to face and the generations after me are going to face because of climate change really needs to start being addressed now. And this is what I can do. They say act locally, start locally, and try to affect some positive change that way. And this is what I can do. This is where my skills lie.
Okay.
This is where my knowledge is. And honestly, it's just it's got to be done, I think, and that's my perspective. So I'm just going to try to help it out as best I can. But yeah. maybe
Well,
personal
we-
satisfaction, but
We Yankees are always wanting to know if somebody's reaching in our pocket. So
oh yeah, no, I'm not asking for any financial compensation for me. I've honestly paid for quite a
Okay.
few things out of pocket myself.
It
Anyway,
sounds
so,
like it, yeah.
but
Well, that's, I just,
Well, you bought the
I-
license for this Zoom.
I did, yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no thanks are necessary. All right. Just let me know if you all have any questions. I'll reach out to you all back on Monday and we'll move from there. Thank you very much for attending and
Okay.
let me know if you need anything.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Nick.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.